So, a little about the story and a little about the song. So, about a week before my dad went to the emergency room, I had seen him and he had called me and he had told me that his spine was hurting him and that his back was hurting him and that his doctors thought that he had fractured his, vertebrae. So he tried physical therapy, said there wasn't nothing they could do for him, whatever issues he had going on. Physical therapy was not what he needed. About a week later, I knew he had an MRI on a Monday, and he either slept through it or he missed the appointment. Somehow he missed the appointment. So he called me that night and told me that he had missed the appointment and they had rescheduled the appointment for the following Friday, which would have been, October the 29th. So on Thursday, October the 28th, I got a phone call from, Thursday, it would have been Friday the 30th. So on the 29th, I got a phone call from my daddy, and he said, "Sissy," he said, "the pain was so bad, I got in my car and I drove myself to the hospital." He said, "I'm at the emergency room." And I said, "Well, Dad, why didn't you call me? I would have came and got you and I would have taken you myself, or you could have called the ambulance." And he said, "Sissy," he's like, "I don't really know what came over me." He said, "I really don't know how I got here." He said, "I know I drove." He said, "The pain was just so unbearable that I just got in the car and left." So we talked for a minute, and then after that, he told me that they had done an MRI. And he said on the MRI that they had found some spots. So he told me they were going to admit him, and after they admitted him, he called, told me good night, and I told him that I would talk to him on Friday, which was October the 30th. So I get up on the 30th, and I try to call him. He doesn't answer the phone. And so I decided to go ahead and get dressed and go to the hospital. Because of COVID, they were only allowing so many people in per family. So he was only allowed to have one person, which he's not married, and I'm the only biological child that he has. And so as I'm on my way to the hospital, I get a phone call from the hospital. And it's Dad's doctor, and they asked me if I was coming to the hospital, and I let them know that I was on my way, and they said that they needed to talk to me, and they wanted to talk to me in person. They didn't want to talk to me over the phone. So I get there, and my dad's asleep, and he doesn't look good, and we have a really hard time getting him awake. So the doctors and I finally got him awake and a little coherent, and they started to explain to me that Daddy had spots on his liver, on both of his adrenal glands. He had a mass in his lungs, and the vertebrae in his back were not broken, but they were deteriorated because he had cancer in his spine. And they told me that day that my daddy had about 6 months to live, possibly less. So I spend some time with Daddy and I leave. And they had spoke about hospice before I left. And so, they told him all these different things that he could possibly do, but that they weren't 100% sure, if it would prolong anything. And if after he went and had biopsies, and because we didn't know the root of the problem, we just knew he had cancer, and he had cancer really, really bad. So on Saturday, the doctors called me, and they asked me to come back to the hospital Saturday morning, and they told me that my dad wasn't remembering what we had told him the day before, but he was very coherent. He was up, he was eating, he was having a good day. So I got dressed. I went back to the hospital. And I had a 3.5 hour conversation with doctors and my dad, 2 different doctors and specialists. And so they told him again, here's where we're at. You can have, I can send you home. I can refer you. You go to your regular doctor. That doctor will then have to refer you somewhere else. Then we'll have to do this, this, and this. And then once we find the root of your problem, then we will be able to send you to a oncologist, a cancer doctor, and then it'll be that doctor's decision of whether there's chemo or radiation. And if that is a choice, then, your chemo and your radiation is going to be very, very painful. You're gonna pass away. It could prolong you a week, could prolong you a couple weeks. It may even prolong you a couple of months. But you are not going to get better. But during this time, you are going to be in way more pain than you would be if we put you in the care of hospice and let, your body and God's will be done. So hospice was full. Hang on. Okay, sorry, had a phone call. So anyways, on that Saturday, they were telling us about the hospice, and then they came to tell us, they told my daddy, they said, well, you need too much care. The care that he needed, hospice couldn't provide that care like he would have in a hospital. And then they had no beds. So the decision was made for him to come and live with the boys and I. And that day, Daddy just kept on and on, just asking the doctors, are you sure there's nothing they can do? Well, finally they brought the MRI in, and they explained everything that the MRI showed. And my daddy was ate up with cancer. Like, it was all over his body. He had had a CAT scan in April of 2019, and that CAT scan showed nothing. So they're thinking that it was the small cell that happens real rapid, and then it got into his bones, and and it just really started to take him and started to take a toll on him. So I ended up spending some more time with my dad, and he was in very bright spirits. And hang on again. Okay, sorry again. So we decided that Dad was going to come and live with the boys and I. And, that day I told my daddy, I said, Daddy, you've been a very, very lonely man for many years. And I don't care if you're with me for one day or if you're with me for 10 years plus. I said, you are going to be with me and the kids, and you're not going anywhere. And we're going to make every day very special. You're going to go out of this world on your next journey with the biggest smile and the fullest heart that you've ever had. So we hugged and we kissed each other on the cheek and on the forehead, and I left. And so the next day I got a call from the hospital telling me that they were going to discharge my dad, but that they couldn't discharge him and allow me to pick him up because his spine was so bad that he could have stood up and he could have broken half. And said that hospice couldn't bring him to my house because he would have to sit in a wheelchair all the way from Morganton to my house. So the only option that was left was taking him by EMS. Well, he calls me, this was 9 o'clock in the morning that they discharged him. He calls me at 3 o'clock. He's like, Sissy, what in the world is going on? He's like, why am I still at the hospital? They discharged me a long time ago, and I had to explain to him, Dad, I can't come get you, and hospice can't bring you, and this is why. And I was like, you have to be brought by EMS. And he just started ranting and raving. He's like, I'm not paying no EMS bill. This is crazy. And I just kind of laughed with him. And I told him, I said, Daddy, it's okay. right now we're not worried about bills. We're not worried about money. We're worried about you and you being safe and where you need to be. So eventually that night, about 9:30, the EMS brought him and dropped him off. And Sunday night, he was playing the guitar. He was going outside in his wheelchair. He was eating. He had ate like 5 or 6 times that day. I bought him a bunch of Halloween candy. And he just had candy. He was playing the guitar with Branson. We were playing music. We were singing. And he loved Shelby the Swamp Man. That was his thing when he came to my house. And so, probably about, I would say, probably about midnight, I came in here and I sat down with him for a little bit, and I told him, I said, Daddy, I'm going to go to bed. And he begged me not to go to bed. He was like, well, can you not just sleep on the couch? And I said, Daddy, I'm just on the other side of the wall. If you need me, all you have to do is say my name, and I'll be right in here. So my youngest son, Branson, he decided that he would stay up for a little bit with my dad. So about 12:30, my dad yells for me, and he's in a lot of pain, and he's, upset and crying, and he was like, it just hurts. And so I ended up having to call hospice out at 1 o'clock in the morning, and they had to have several talks with him about his medicine and wait on the doctor to contact and see where we could go from there. Well, while I was waiting on hospice, my dad and I had a moment. We had a moment of the I'm sorries, the reasons of why things in our relationship were the way that they were, but the reassurance that there was always love there, and that I was always his little girl, and that, whatever God's will was, we were both going to be okay with it. So, we hugged each other, and he kissed me on the cheek, and then my daddy kissed me. I went to go kiss him on his forehead, and he kissed me on the lips, and he told me that he loved me. And that was something my daddy had never done. And so hospice comes out, and they, did what they needed to do. Well, I had to wait like 45 minutes to be able to give Dad his medicine. And by this time, he's very agitated. And so I tell Daddy, I said, Daddy, I've got an alarm set. I'm going to lay on the couch beside of you. And when my alarm goes off, I'm going to give you that medicine. So I lay down, and about not even 5 minutes after I lay down, I'm watching him, and my daddy falls asleep. And I got up, however many minutes later, and I gave him his medicine, and my dad was never the same then. Like, we were given the gift of talking about us and our relationship. And, Monday he slept all day. Tuesday, he had a tough day. They ended up having to come out and, catheterize him, and they're pretty sure that he had prostate cancer while they were doing the catheter. And, that was just bothering him. And, my dad was just very agitated. I listened to my dad, see these different things, and it's part of the passing process. But on, late Tuesday night, he kind of opens his eyes, and he looks at my wall, and he says, Sissy, they're flying. And I said, Dad, who's flying? What do you see? And he was just so happy, and he starts wandering his eyes towards the ceiling, and he says, Sissy, they're flying. And then all of a sudden, I see the happiest, biggest smile that my daddy's ever had on his face. And his eyes were wide open, and his teeth were showing, and he was just so happy. And he just gets kind of loud, and he says, Sissy, it's Bud. And he said, Buddy, I'm coming. He's like, Sissy, it's Bud. And then my daddy closed his eyes. And then he opened his eyes for the very last time about 1.5 2 minutes before he took his last breath on Thursday morning. So we have several songs that were special to us. And this one became special to us several years back. And I had never thought about trying to sing it. I honestly didn't think that I would be able to, but after meeting so many of my daddy's friends, and I mean, there were hundreds of people at my house that my dad hadn't seen in years and years and years. And I just knew that this was the proper song to sing for my daddy. And so I have only sang this song maybe 6 times, only in like the past 2 days. But I want to dedicate this to my dad, Charles David Loudermilk. And I just want him to know that I know he's watching over myself and the boys, and that he is very, very much missed. And I hope I did the right thing as a daughter, taking care of a parent. And I don't know how 6 months turned into 6 days. And I don't know how I'm going to deal with the holidays, because my daddy just wanted Christmas so badly. So if you all will just keep me in your prayers and keep my boys in your prayers, because death isn't easy on anyone. But for, young children to witness something like that, it can be trying on them mentally. So I'm going to sing this song for my dad. This was played at his funeral, and the song's called Daddy's Little Girl by the Shrines. The smell of Old Spice, a fat cap on the dash, her windows rolled down in the wind, birds are flying past, singing along with the radio, little out of tune. Hanging on to that steering wheel was the man who hung the moon. Used to wrap my hands around his little fingers. Turns out he was wrapped around mine. Said you can be anything you want to in this great big world, but I'm always gonna be Daddy's little girl. He always used to tell me, don't grow up too fast. Love will come and love will go. Your first won't be your last. I didn't always listen when he gave me advice, though I hate to admit it, well, the man was always right. Used to wrap my hands around his little fingers. Turns out he was wrapped around mine. He said you can be anything you want to in this great big world, but I'm always gonna be Daddy's little girl. miss you, Daddy. I love you.